Hey everybody, it's the Sheriff, and we're here again with another GLC set review. Today we're talking about Ascended Heroes. This set is primarily a collector set with a bunch of reprints, but there are a few new cards that are interesting that we'll take a look at. So we'll go through each type and then look at trainers, and then we'll look at the tier list of types afterwards. I do have to apologize. All of my images for the new cards are not in English because I couldn't get them all from one source. So I do apologize for that, but I'll still read everything off. So first up, we're going to talk about Silcoon, which is a stage 1. It has the ability Cascading Cocoons. When you play this card to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may use this ability, search your deck for a Cascoon or Silcoon, and put it onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. So this is super cool because you get to play Beautifly and Dustox in the same deck. You normally can't do this because they both evolve from Wurmple, so it's super awkward. You kind of have to choose one or the other, but with this, you now get to play both, which is super cool because Beautifly has a really good draw engine, and there are a couple really interesting Dustox cards, like the one with the Ancient Trait Plus that takes an extra prize card, or the new Dustox that we're going to talk about next. But I think this is definitely the best Silcoon that we have. If you want to pair it with playing Dustox as well. So let's talk about that Dustox. It is a stage 2, 140 HP, has the ability Rustling Wind. Once during your turn, you may flip a coin. If heads, return one energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon to their hand. And then it has an attack for 2 grass that does 100 damage, and they are now poisoned and asleep. So a couple things. I like this card and how it can both play in a poison deck, but it can also just play by itself. It's got a really annoying ability for your opponent that you can use every single turn. You do have to choose if you want to play this over the Ancient Trait Dustox. It kind of just depends on the build of your deck. They're two very different cards, but I still think it's pretty solid. And you may as well play a Dustox if you're playing the Beautifly. I don't think you should play one without the other. But yeah, overall, pretty solid. Next, we're going to go to Fire. We have a new Entei that has an attack for 2 fire that does 30 plus damage. If you have at least 4 fire energy in play, this attack does 90 more damage. So, if you have 4 energy, 120 damage. If you have Charizard, this is only 2 energy that you need in play. But it's still only hitting for 120, which is pretty low nowadays. It used to be fine. Now it's not really. You kind of need to hit that 140, 130, 140 mark most of the time. So I think it just falls short there. If we compare this to other cards, it is very similar to the Volcanion, which does 110 for the same condition. But Volcanion also has the Flare Starter attack that lets you accelerate a ton of energy if you go second. So I still think I would just rather play Volcanion over this Entei, and there are a couple other Enteis that are just as good, if not better, with the Revenge Entei or the quote-unquote Hydro Pump Entei. Um, but yeah, if you're really into the Sente, then like it's serviceable. Let's talk about this new Nummel, which has the ability Incandescent Body. And if this Pokemon is in the active spot and takes damage from the attacks of your active Pokemon, the attacking Pokemon is now burned. So he's really cool in a burn deck. Shout out to Forest. He's gonna love this guy. But you can pair this with burn cards like Magmortar, Infernape, um, and in the next slide you'll see some other cards that you can also pair it with. But I do think that if you were playing Nummel, this is probably the best one, so shout out to him. Let's talk about Camerupt, sorry, my bad, which for a single fire, it does 110, and if they, but they have to be burned in order to use this attack. So if they're not burned, this attack does nothing. But in a burn deck, this is easily achievable with stuff like Volcarona, where you can discard an energy and leave them burned. And so this guy is, technically he's hitting 130 for one energy because of the added damage from the burn. And you can easily boost this with, say, like a muscle band or something to reach 150. And then that goes even higher with things like Magmortar and Infernape, where you can add those damage counters onto your burn. So I think he's a very good attacker in the burn deck specifically, and it pairs well with its pre-evolution. I mean, you don't want the pre-evolution to get knocked out if you're using him, but still, very solid option for burn decks. I know Forrest is going to love this guy. Next we'll go to water, and we'll talk about Ens Vanillux, which for a double colorless energy, you double the number of damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon, which is super cool in a spread style deck. You can just pair this with a ton of spread cards, and water has quite a lot to work with. You've got the Frostlass with the nice ability. The Simipour has a pretty decent attack along with the Frostmoth. Playing the Frostmoth with the Simipour is a little awkward because you have to accelerate energy to the Simipour to really use it, and if you're playing this spread Frostmoth, then the only way you're accelerating energy is probably Baxcalibur at that point, or you could but I mean, you also have like Aqua Patch, and you could even go as far as like using Crispin or something crazy like that. But yeah, it's pretty solid. Kind of an end game attacker, right, in your water deck. The only issue is like bench barriers are running rampant, and so it's a little awkward to play right now, but I think it is a solid pick for water spread. Next we'll talk about a new Frostmoth, which has the ability inviting wings once during your turn. If this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may use this ability. Each player draws a card. So super awkward because one, it has to be in the active, and two, you are also letting your opponent draw, and honestly, water does not need draw. It has Octillery and it has Inteleon, so like I don't think you should ever play this guy. And you just compare it to the other Frostmoths, like if you like the Energy Accelerator is by far the best, but then the spread attacker is quite solid, like I said, in that spread option. So I think it is just too awkward and doesn't have enough influence on the game to be that great. We'll go to Lightning, which has a new Tapu Koko, and its first attack for 1 Lightning is Fast Flight, and you can use this attack on your first turn, and you discard your hand and draw 5. So kind of a nice desperation move if you are going first and you have nothing. You can kind of dig deeper to try and set up your board. It's basically the effect of Carmine, right? And then for 3 energy, you're doing 130, and you discard 2 energy from this Pokemon. 130 is fine. It could be a lot better. But then you also have to compare this guy to the other Tapu Kokos, which there is, of course, the Flying Flip promo, where you spread damage, or the other Tapu Koko that is kind of a comeback card. For 3, you're doing 180, which is way better, as long as you are behind on prizes. So I think those 2 options are definitely better than this one. So that's why it's going to get a 2. I do want to shout out this Mischievous, because it has the Ascension attack, so for an energy you get to evolve it. I think this is, and there's a couple quite good Mismagius, like the Spiteful Magic and Mysterious Message. I think this one specifically with the Spiteful Magic is very good, because if that is, it's going to sit in the active after you evolve it, right? And it punishes your opponent for knocking it out. But if they don't, then you just get to spread damage, which is pretty cool. And then you have the other one that is really good for drawing a bunch of cards, and then it knocks itself out. So you don't really want this to sit in the active and use your attack to evolve it. But still, I do think this is the best Mischievous that you can use. And going off of that, we do have a new Mismagius with the attack Assassin Magic. 60 damage if your opponent's active Pokemon is affected by a special condition. Put 6 damage counters on one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So 60-60 spread, but they have to be affected by special conditions, and that's pretty hard in Psychic, I think. Like, you have the Hypno and the Hypnotoxic Laser, and Hypno is terrible because it also puts you to sleep. So I don't think this is consistent enough, and I think the other Mismagius are just better. We do have this new Spectrier, which for 1 does 30, but then for 3 energy you discard all energy attached to this Pokemon, and you place 12 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. So there are pros and cons to this guy, because it is extremely similar to Galarian Articuno. Now, Galarian Articuno powers itself up, and this does not. However, Spectrier places 12 damage counters instead of doing damage, so it goes through bench barrier. And the other thing is, Articuno has a retreat cost of 2, and this is only 1, so it is easier to get out of the active and not get stuck. Plus it has that first attack, which you can use if you need to. So there are pros and cons. You could play both if you really wanted to. I still think the Articuno is stronger, but I do think this has a place, especially getting around those bench barriers, so that is pretty interesting. On to fighting, we have this new Team Rocket's Dugtrio, which has the ability Pothole. Whenever your opponent's active Pokemon moves to the bench during their turn, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon when it moves from the active to the bench, not the other way around. And this is really cool because you can play it with the Team Rocket's T-Tar, which is super awesome because it also like spreads damage counters, and you could play this with the Hitmon combo, just to get a little bit more damage on the board. So I think he's really interesting. I think he'd be cool to play in this deck, especially now that you have the stones, the rocks, to make the deck more consistent. Could be pretty fun. We then have this Metacham, which for a single energy does 150 damage, but if you don't have exactly 7 cards in your hand, this attack does nothing. I think this is too awkward. If you compare this to Iron Boulder, that is a basic, and this is a stage 1, and the basics attack is just like way easier to use, and it does 170 damage, and matching hand sizes I think is way easier than getting your hand to 7, because you kind of just have to like draw a ton. And you do have Lunatone. You could play it with supporters that don't disrupt your hand while drawing, like Erica's Hospitality, or you can play it with Research. You just can't play anything afterwards, which is awkward unless you have the Lunatone. I compare this damage to the Lucario, and I would much rather just play the Lucario. This is serviceable, you can play it, but I think the Lucario is just better. We have this Carbink with the ability Dual Type, and while this Pokemon is in play, it is both Fighting and Psychic type. So you could play this guy to use in the mirror for weakness if you really wanted to, but its attack only does 70 damage, and if your opponent has 2 or fewer prize cards remaining, it does 100 more damage. So this is really only for the end game, 170 damage for 3, but if I'm in the end game that much with that condition, I would much rather just use Crisis Punch, as it does way more damage for the same amount of energy, and you can just attach that to whatever Pokemon. So it is a little bit awkward, but it is interesting because you can hit the mirror for weakness. We do have this new Okidogi, which for 1 does 30, and then for 3 it does 80 damage, and it does 60 more for each prize card your opponent took during their last turn. So it's kind of a revenge attacker for 3, and it's only doing 140, sometimes 200 maybe, with your combos like in Psychic or like Guzzlord, but you're already just beating that because weakness and fighting. But the thing is, it's Okidogi, and you would have to play this one over the other one, and the Adrena Power Okidogi is the best attacker in the entire format. So I don't think you're ever playing this guy unless you really, really want to. The art's pretty cool though. In Dark, we have this new Peckerunt, which has an ability: if this Pokemon is knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, you get to search your deck for 1 card and put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. So it's basically a comp search if it's knocked out, which is pretty cool. So you can just sit this in the active, try and set up the bench, and when it gets knocked out, you get to just search for whatever you need in the situation, which is pretty cool. And then its attack is okay. It's, well, it's fine. It does 20 damage for 1, and then the next turn it does 50 more damage. So it can pick off maybe a small basic if it's stuck in the active or something. So I think this guy's fine. I think it's pretty cool to sit in the active while you try and set up, you do compare this to the other Pekarant, which has the poison boosting ability. But if you're not running a poison deck, then I think this guy is pretty solid. We have this new King Gambit, which is cool. It has the ability where attacks used by this Pokemon deal 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon for each prize card your opponent has taken. This is really interesting. It has an attack for 180 for 2, which is pretty good, but you do deal 50 to yourself. However, you could pair this guy with something like Memory Capsule or the Stadium that lets you copy previous evolution's attacks, and you still get that damage boost. So there are a couple Bisharps that are pretty cool that you could pair with this. There's the single lunge, which if it has no damage counters on it, it does 120 damage plus your ability, right? There's the dual type Bisharp, which has the retaliate, which is cool. And then the other Bisharp, where it does 30 more damage for each damage counter on all of your benched Pawniard, which actually does nothing. So don't play that one. But the other two are pretty cool. If you lean into this memory capsule kind of play. Next we have Dragon, and we have Dragon Air, which has an ability. If this Pokemon has any energy attached to it, you may use this ability. You search for an evolution Pokemon and put it into your hand. So very, very strong. We've seen the similar ability on Gabite. This requires an energy attached to it, which is really awkward, because if you're playing the Fast Call Dragonite, you don't really want to commit an energy in Dragon to something that isn't attacking, because energy is very precious in Dragon. But you could pair it with some other Dragonites, which have pretty solid attacks. There's one that accelerates energy. There's the Jet Cruise one, where no one has a retreat cost, and it has a very nice attack, and is pretty beefy at that. You still could use this with the Fast Call Dragonite. I think that would be fine. The other issue is this has 100 HP. So you can't search it with a level ball. If it had 90 HP, I would absolutely say this is the definitive Dragonite or Dragonair you should be playing. But still solid. Very, very good consistency ability if you are playing the evolutions archetype of dragon. So yeah, just still a very solid Pokemon. We then have a new Rayquaza that its first attack for 2 energy does 20 damage, but if it switched from the bench to the active this turn, it does 90 more, so you're doing 110 for 2 energy, which is quite good for taking out a lot of evolving basics, even Pokemon like Lunatone or Solrock. And this is quite good with Reshiram because you can accelerate a fire and attach a single energy to it, retreat the Reshiram, and you get to attack with the Rayquaza in all one turn. And then its second attack, you do 130 for 3, which is serviceable. It's fine, like I said earlier. You're KOing a lot of other basics with a couple exceptions, but you could always play a damage booster if you really needed to. So, really solid attacker. The energy also synergizes with Raging Bolt with that lightning, so that's pretty cool. So yeah. Next, we will talk about En's Zekrom. Its first attack is Shred for 3 energy, it does 70, and it's not affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon, which is fine, not that great. Its second attack does 250 damage for 4, which is, and then it can't attack next turn, and it's pretty expensive. But if you played this with like the Energy Acceleration Dragonite, and maybe like the Reshiram or something, then you could actually, if you have both of those, then you could actually power this guy up pretty easily and swing for 250. But if you are playing this guy for the Shred attack, I would much rather use the Ancient Koraidon, because for the exact same amount of energy, it's doing 130 for its Shred attack, which is way better than 70. So it kind of depends on which attack you want to use with this guy. I mean, you could play both, but I think they're just better options. So yeah, up to you. We do have this new Noivern, which has agility for 2. You do 40. If you flip a coin, if heads, during your opponent's next turn, you prevent all damage from and effects of attacks done to this Pokemon. And then for 2 other energy, it does 70 damage, and if it has a tool, you do 70 more, so 140 for 2 is pretty good. The issue, and it just needs a tool, which is quite easy, but the issue with this is a stage 2 with only 120 HP, which is kind of sad. I think if its HP was 150, then there would be something to talk about, but 120 is just way too low on a stage 1. Its attack is fine, but yeah, it is too squishy for an evolution. I do want to point out, actually, I forgot to, with this Rayquaza, its second attack is Dragon Claw, so you could pair the Z Crystal tool with him, which is pretty cool. So next we have this Larry's Staraptor, which for 1 colorless does 60 damage, and if this Pokemon is poisoned or burned, it does 100 more. So 160 for 1 is pretty good, but you gotta poison or burn yourself. There are ways to do that, but I don't recommend doing it. But then for 3 energy, it does 150 damage. You discard 2 energy from this Pokemon, and it does 50 damage to one of your opponent's benched. So 150 is very good, and 50 snipe can set up other KOs, especially if you're playing this in a colorless spread deck, with the options on the right, as you can see. So he's fine. The issue is he's on a stage 2, so that is quite awkward. The energy isn't really an issue. You could play the triple acceleration energy with it and just attack in 1 turn, but I'm not sure if you want to do that. So solid, but it is on a stage 2, and I would only play this in a spread version of colorless. We do have this other accelerant in Larry's Komala, which its ability, once during your turn, if this Pokemon is on your bench, you may attach an energy card from your hand to your active Larry's Pokemon. So any energy card you get to attach to your Larry's Pokemon in the active, which is pretty good. The only good attacker, though, is the Staraptor, which is, like I said, it's solid, but it is a stage 2. But if you're playing the Staraptor, you may as well play the Komala. now we're on to trainers. So first we have thick scales, which the dragon Pokemon this attached to takes 50 less damage from grass, fire, water, and lightning Pokemon. So taking 50 less is quite strong. You pair that with like Crystal Cave, and suddenly your dragons are tanky. The issue is you have to be playing a lot into these 4 types, which if your league is playing a ton of grass and water, then maybe you throw this in. And it's either going to be really good or it's going to be completely useless. If you wanted to go a slightly more consistent route, you could just go with Pot Helmet, which is a little less damage, but you take less damage from everything. So, still a very strong pick. I think it's completely based on your local meta. Still very good though. Now let's talk about this Canary supporter. You must discard a card from your hand in order to play this card, and you get to search your deck for 4 lightning Pokemon, reveal them, and put them into your hand. Then you shuffle your deck. So this is super strong, I think, in lightning. I think it boosts its consistency a lot. You could use this turn 1 and get all your basics, or if you have already got all your basics, you can literally get all of your evolutions for lightning because the deck plays a lot of them. And you can get them all at once, which is like everything you need, really. Once you have all of these guys set up, then lightning just explodes, right? So I think this card is an amazing addition for lightning. We'll see if it has any actual influence and lets lightning have a comeback. We'll see. I hope it does. Okay, here we go. The best card in the set. We have the new Pokepad, which says search your deck for a Pokemon without a rule box, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. So this is literally a Master Ball without the ball category. You get to search for whatever Pokemon you want in your deck, which is very good. Of course, you cannot grab this guy with like Ball Guy or something like that, but still, I think this thing is gonna go into every single deck. I don't see a case where you don't want to play this card because it is ridiculous. 10 out of 5. We do have a new supporter named Waitress, and you look at the top 6 cards of your deck, choose a basic energy you find there, and attach it to one of your Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. So it's the same thing as a Max Elixir, but it's not restricted to just basic Pokemon, but it is your supporter for turn, so I find it quite expensive, really. If it was like, look at the top 8 or something, then maybe, but I think I would much rather just play Max Elixir or like a Crispin, which just, accelerates an energy. You do have to play 2 different types of energy, but you can build your deck around that. But still, it's not the worst supporter. It is it is energy acceleration if your deck struggles with that, so not the worst thing in the world. Then we have this new tool called Team Rocket's Hypnotizer, and if the Team Rocket's Pokemon this card is attached to is in the active spot, if the Team Rocket's Pokemon this card is attached to is in the active spot and is damaged by an attack, then the attacking Pokemon is now asleep. I don't think this has any I don't know. This is too weak. Like for a tool slot, you're not really getting anything out of this. The ideal situation is you promote a new Pokemon and knock out their active, so this isn't really doing anything except for stalling. Um, so in very, very specific situations, like maybe in a sleep deck or something, you play this card, but you still, it has to be attached to a Rockets Pokemon, which is even more restricting. So I think it is just too inconsistent. But that's going to do it for all the new cards to talk about. Let's talk about the tier list. I don't think much has changed. I still think the best types are Psychic, Fighting, and Water. I did move Water up to S tier. I didn't have it before, but I do think these are the three types. I probably would put it in this order though. Um, A is pretty interchangeable. Um, I think colorless and dragon for sure are interchangeable. Um, and then you have grass, which is also just pretty solid right now. In B, I have lightning and metal, which are just a little clunky right now, and kind of finding their way of what to do in the meta right now. In C, I still have dark and fire, which are struggling even more. And then, of course, in D, we have Fairy. So that is going to do it for our review. Please let me know if there are any cards that I didn't include or anything I missed that you want me to talk about. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.